Celine Cremer was not just another traveler passing through life. She was a bright and curious soul, deeply drawn to the hidden corners of the world, always eager to capture fleeting beauty through the lens of her camera. At just 31 years old, she had already seen more of Europe than most people do in a lifetime. Friends remembered how she wandered through cobbled streets and old towns, how she lingered at quiet lakesides, and how her camera often became her closest companion. For Celine, photography wasn't about taking pictures for others. It was about holding on to moments of stillness, about preserving the way the world felt when no one else was looking. Born and raised in Belgium, Celine grew up in a home where creativity was welcomed. She had a gentle nature, a soft-spoken presence, and a heart that sought peace in the places most people overlooked. While others her age were chasing careers in busy cities, Celine found herself longing for silence, for landscapes that spoke without words. Her friends often described her as both adventurous and introspective, a mix of courage and calm. She was the type of person who preferred quiet mountain paths over crowded tourist streets, the type of person who could stand still for hours, simply watching the way light filtered through leaves. In early 2023, her search for that kind of untouched beauty led her far from home, to one of the most isolated places on Earth, Tasmania. This rugged island state south of mainland Australia is a land of extremes. Ancient rainforests stretch endlessly into the mist. Cold winds sweep over jagged mountains, and waterfalls tumble into gorges so deep they seem carved by time itself. For Celine, Tasmania was more than a stop on a map. It was a chance to live inside the wilderness, to lose herself in the rhythms of a land that had barely changed in millions of years. Among the many wonders that Tasmania offered, one place in particular called out to her, Philosopher Falls. Hidden in the dense Tarkine rainforest of the island's northwest, the falls are reached by a narrow track that winds through moss-covered trees, ferns, and dripping green walls of vegetation. Visitors who walk the path often describe it as a step back in time, a glimpse into a world that feels untouched by human hands. The air there is heavy with the scent of wet earth. Every step sinks into soil softened by constant rain. Birdsong echoes through the forest, but beneath it lies a silence that feels ancient. To most, Philosopher Falls is a short hike, a peaceful afternoon trip from the nearby mining town of Waratah. But to Celine, it was something much deeper, a sanctuary, a reminder of why she traveled. She wanted to stand at the edge of the falls, to feel the spray on her face, to know what it was like to be in a place so old, so alive, and so far from the noise of modern life. By June of 2023, Celine had been in Tasmania for several months. She rented simple places to stay, never searching for luxury, only for quiet. Her social media posts from that time showed calm, reflective moments, a picture of a winding forest road under fog, a snapshot of a golden Tasmanian sunset, and close-up shots of wild fungi that few would even notice. She rarely wrote long captions. A single word, sometimes just an emoji, was enough. She let the photographs speak for her. Her family back in Belgium supported her adventures, though at times they worried. Celine was independent. She preferred traveling alone, setting her own pace, making her own choices. That independence gave her freedom, but it also meant that when she stepped into wild places, she was on her own. On the morning of June 17, 2023, Celine left Waratah and drove her white Honda CR-V towards the Philosopher Falls car park. It was meant to be a simple day walk. The trail wasn't long, less than an hour to reach the waterfall. But Tasmania's winters are unpredictable. The air grows colder as the afternoon fades, and sudden rains can turn even the gentlest path into something dangerous. Still, Celine showed no signs of worry. To her, this was another chance to embrace the wilderness, another chance to take in the quiet, the solitude, and the beauty she had traveled so far to find. She parked her car at the edge of the trail, picked up her camera, and stepped into the forest. For Celine, it must have felt like a doorway into another world. The hush of trees, the soft crush of leaves underfoot, the endless green pressing in from all sides. What she couldn't know was that this walk, one she likely thought would last only a few hours, would become the last trace anyone would have of her. When Celine stepped onto the Philosopher Falls track that cold June day, no one could have imagined the silence that would follow. For a while, everything seemed normal. Her white Honda CR-V stood quietly in the car park, as if waiting for her return. But the hours turned into days, and the days into more than a week, with no word from her, no photos, no reassuring message to her family back home. Celine was not someone who vanished without reason. She had promised to catch a ferry to Melbourne on June 21st, a journey she had carefully planned as part of her wider travels. When she did not show up for the ferry, her family in Belgium felt the first sharp sting of worry. At first, perhaps, they hoped she had lost signal or been delayed. But when their calls and messages went unanswered, when silence replaced her usual updates, their fear began to grow. On June 26th, those fears became too heavy to ignore. Her family filed a formal concern for welfare report, pleading for answers from thousands of kilometers away. The next day, June 27th, authorities in Tasmania began their search, starting with the last trace they had, her car. The vehicle was found exactly where she had left it, parked neatly at the entrance to the Philosopher Falls trail. To the search teams, the discovery was both a clue and a heartbreak. Inside, her belongings were untouched. No sign of disturbance, no evidence of a struggle. The car sat there quietly, as if frozen in time, while the forest around it carried on with its endless rhythms. Investigators later concluded it had likely been parked there for around a week before they arrived, coinciding with the last faint signal from Celine's phone. The implications were grim. Celine had walked into the forest on June 17th, and for at least 10 days, there had been no sign of her return. For her family in Belgium, the distance was unbearable. Every hour of silence felt like a wall closing in. For her mother, Ariane, the not knowing was almost worse than any outcome. To imagine her daughter somewhere alone in the Tasmanian wilderness, cold and unprepared for the winter nights, was a torment no parent could endure quietly. Police moved quickly. Search and rescue teams were deployed, their boots sinking into the same mossy paths Celine had once admired. Volunteers came forward, locals who knew the dangers of the Tarkine better than anyone. Helicopters swept across the canopy, their blades chopping through the mist. Drones scanned from above, their cameras searching for the smallest trace, a piece of clothing, a flash of movement, anything that might suggest where Celine had gone. But Philosopher Falls and the forests surrounding it were no ordinary place to search. This was a landscape built to hide. Towering trees swallowed sound. Thick moss draped across fallen trunks and covered sinkholes that yawned beneath the surface. The undergrowth was so dense that in many places, rescuers had to crawl under branches or climb over twisted roots just to move forward. Each day brought new rain, the ground turning slick and treacherous, the cold seeping into every layer of clothing. Authorities made it clear. From the very beginning, they believed Celine's disappearance was most likely an accident. She was described as an inexperienced hiker, someone who had prepared for a light day walk, not for the brutal cold and sudden storms of a Tasmanian winter. For professionals who had seen this wilderness claim lives before, it was a grim but familiar pattern, a traveler underestimating the dangers, stepping just a little too far into the unknown. Still, despite every effort, ground crews, swift water rescue specialists, a cadaver detection dog flown in from New South Wales, there was no sign of her. The forest kept its silence. When the official search brought no answers, Celine's disappearance took on a heavier weight. Weeks passed, then months, but the forest remained silent. For the authorities, it became a case suspended in uncertainty, but for Celine's family and friends, that silence was unbearable. They could not accept that she had simply vanished into the trees without a trace. It was during this dark period that they turned to someone outside the police, a man named Ken Gamble. A cybercrime specialist with years of experience in complex missing persons investigations, Gamble was known for uncovering hidden trails in the digital world where others had found nothing. With the family's permission, He gained access to Celine's Google account, hoping that her phone might still carry whispers of where she had gone. What he discovered was astonishing. More than 40 GPS points, a breadcrumb trail of coordinates, tracked her movements on the very day she disappeared. The data led investigators deep into the timeline of June 17th, showing her journey up until 4:18 p.m. It suggested something chilling. Celine had not stayed on the main Philosopher Falls trail. Instead, she had crossed a small waterway, known as C7mm Creek, and climbed toward higher ground. It was a place thick with vegetation, far more treacherous than the official track, and according to Gamble, an area that had not been fully searched by police. For Gamble, the clues pointed to a tragic but plausible scenario. Celine may have relied on her phone's map app, following what appeared to be a path, but which, in reality, guided her deeper into hostile terrain. To him, it explained why she vanished so quickly. One wrong turn in that environment, and she could have been swallowed by the forest within minutes. Armed with this data, Gamble and his team launched their own searches in 2024, nearly a year after Celine disappeared. They pushed into areas that few had dared to enter before. The undergrowth was suffocating. In some places, progress meant crawling on hands and knees beneath fallen logs. In others, it meant climbing over piles of tangled trees just to move forward a few meters. The forest seemed to resist them at every step, as though guarding its secrets. To cover more ground, Gamble also partnered with Daniel Wood, a drone expert. Together, they employed advanced LiDAR mapping technology capable of analyzing the forest floor beneath the thick canopy. The drones scanned the area for anomalies, subtle changes in color, shapes hidden beneath layers of moss, anything that could hint at human remains or personal belongings. For a moment, there was hope. The scans picked up patches of unusual coloring, signals that seemed out of place. But when ground teams followed up, braving the mud and the silence, they found nothing. The disappointment was crushing. Each lead carried with it a surge of hope, only to collapse into another dead end. But still, Gamble remained convinced. Based on the data, he believed Celine never wandered far from her last known location. To him, the truth was simple and painful. She likely fell victim to exposure, trapped by the cold and the unforgiving terrain, her body hidden somewhere within a 1-kilometer radius of that final phone signal. Authorities, however, stood firm in their position. By late June 2023, medical experts had already warned that the conditions Celine faced, freezing rain, snow, constant wetness, were not survivable over the length of time she had been missing. On June 29th, police spoke plainly. They no longer believed survival was possible. And by July 10th, less than a month after she disappeared, the official search was suspended. Yet even as the operation closed, police emphasized that missing persons cases in Tasmania are never formally shut down. If new, credible information emerged, they would act. But until then, Celine's trail was left to fade back into the forest. For Celine's family in Belgium, the weeks after her disappearance stretched into an endless blur of fear, grief, and unanswered questions. Thousands of kilometers away, they clung to every update from Tasmania, desperate for news. But as the official search wound down, silence became their constant companion. Her mother, Ariane, spoke of her daughter with a mixture of sorrow and quiet acceptance. She believed Celine had died in a tragic accident, overwhelmed by the elements in a wilderness that gave no mercy to those unprepared for its winter grip. Yet even in her certainty, she carried a mother's hope, not for miracles, but for closure. In interviews, she pleaded softly, "I really hope they find my daughter again. It would give us an answer to all the questions we have." Celine's sister Emily and her closest childhood friend Justine Roit took on the painful responsibility of keeping her story alive. They refused to let the world forget. For them, silence was unbearable. Time, instead of healing, became a reminder of how long the forest had kept its secret. In Tasmania, reminders of the danger were everywhere. The trail to Philosopher Falls remained open to visitors, a well-marked 45-minute walk through a forest alive with fungi, moss, and relics from the island's mining past. Yet interpretive signs along the path told a darker story. Warnings carved into wood and metal echoed all the way back to 1888, describing how moss-covered branches concealed sinkholes beneath the forest floor, traps waiting to collapse without warning. To some, these words felt hauntingly prophetic, a grim parallel to Celine's vanishing. Commander Stuart Wilkinson of Tasmania Police reiterated, even into 2024, that no evidence pointed to foul play. Investigators were clear. All signs indicated that Celine had likely wandered from the marked track into the bush, where disorientation and the brutal weather sealed her fate. False tips, Wilkinson explained, had caused needless anguish to her family, and he urged the public to come forward only with credible information. But her loved ones did not stop. In April and May of 2024, Gamble's private searches carved deeper into the wilderness, though each effort ended in disappointment. And still, the determination to bring Celine home remained unbroken. By December of 2025, nearly 2.5 years after Celine vanished, a new team began preparing a private on-ground search. 4 of her friends, working alongside Gamble, local volunteers, and guided by Tasmanian Police, resolved to comb through the same forest once again. They knew the odds were slim, but the silence had grown unbearable. As one friend wrote, "Time passes, but the silence remains unbearable. We no longer hope for miracles, only answers." Celine's story had become something larger than a single disappearance. It was a reminder of how quickly nature can turn from breathtaking to unforgiving, how even a short trail can carry hidden dangers for those who underestimate its power. Her vanishing was not just a personal tragedy, it stood as a stark testament to the unpredictability of wilderness itself. At the time she went missing, Celine Cremer was 31 years old, a Belgian national with a slim build, a fair complexion, blonde hair, and brown eyes. She had a tattoo on her right arm and a nose piercing. Her exact height and weight were not recorded, and authorities were never able to confirm what clothing she wore or what possessions she carried that day. If alive today, she would be 33 years old. Police continue to appeal to anyone who visited Philosopher Falls or passed through the area between June 17th and 18th, 2023. No detail, they stress, is too small. In such a vast and unforgiving landscape, even the faintest memory could provide a clue. For now, the forest remains silent. The waterfalls still thunder into the gorge, the moss still grows over fallen logs, and the mist still curls between the trees, as it has, for millions of years. But for Celine's family and friends, the silence is not peace. It is an open wound. They continue to search, to wait, and to hope for the one thing nature has not yet given them, an answer.